Ever get that feeling, when you just freeze up? Not like from actual danger, but just not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to dive into that, the whole idea of what happens when you don't do anything, the consequences of inaction, we could call it.
Okay.
And we've got a really interesting example to look at from the online game Survive the Island.
Right. I know that one.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What's so deep about a game?
Yeah.
But trust me, this one gets you thinking. It'll make you really think about those times you've hesitated, even in your own life.
Interesting.
So what is Survive the Island all about?
Well, basically, you're stuck on this, like, mysterious island with a bunch of other players.
Okay, classic setup.
Yeah, and you're all just trying to, survive, obviously.
Right.
The game throws all these crazy situations at you, and you have to make these tough choices, but you never have all the information.
Sounds stressful.
It is.
So where does the inaction come in?
Well, that's the fascinating part. We're looking at these two players, Emily and Sara R. Totally separate people, playing at the same time, but get this, they both went through the exact same events.
Whoa, really? At the same time?
Yep. Identical choices, same everything. And the crazy thing is, they both chose to do nothing.
Nothing. Like they didn't play the game.
Well, they played, but they didn't act.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
So imagine waking up on a beach,
Right.
totally deserted, no idea how you got there.
Yeah, that's scary enough already.
Right. Pretty unsettling.
Girl.
Now you got two options. Follow some footprints that lead into this thick jungle, or check out this creepy shipwreck just offshore.
So classic Survive the Island dilemmas.
Exactly. Now, most players would jump at one of those, right? Explore, try to figure things out.
Makes sense. What did Emily and Sara R do?
They stayed put, just froze. Paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, I guess.
So they did absolutely nothing.
Pretty much.
Okay, so they miss out on exploring, maybe finding supplies.
Sure. But it's way more than that.
Oh.
See, this whole doing nothing thing,
Yeah.
it sets off this chain reaction that makes everything worse.
So their inaction is actually having a negative impact.
Big time. In a survival situation, every single decision or lack of decision matters.
I can see that.
They might have felt safe on that beach at first, but that's an illusion. The sun's beating down, they're totally exposed, and they're missing out on so much.
Like what?
Like finding food and water, obviously,
Right.
or other players who could help.
Makes sense. Safety and numbers and all that. So it's like they're just letting fate decide what happens to them.
Exactly. Instead of, taking charge.
And I'm guessing things don't stay calm for long.
Oh no, things get really bad really fast.
How so?
Well, this is where the psychology of it all comes in. They're stuck on that beach, right? Yeah.
Baking in the sun.
And then they hear it. Cries for help coming from the ocean.
Another player.
Sounds like it. Someone's definitely in trouble. Now, do they react? Do they go try to help? Even just check it out?
Well, given their track record.
Nope. Frozen. Right there on the beach. You can practically feel their isolation growing, not just from the other players, but even from their own survival instincts.
That's intense.
It is. Fear's basically calling all the shots now. Or, should I say, the lack of shots.
You're saying that doing nothing is actually, in itself, a choice.
Yeah, that's the thing. Choosing to do nothing isn't some neutral, harmless thing. It has consequences. And a lot of times, those consequences are worse than if you just took a chance and did something.
Wow. I never really thought about it that way.
It's true.
So, okay, they don't react to the cries for help. Then what?
Well, those consequences we talked about, they really start piling up. That beach, their little safe haven, it becomes a trap. And meanwhile, the other players are out there exploring, adapting. Some are even teaming up.
So Emily and Sara are falling behind.
They're fast. They're missing out on information, resources, you name it. And they're missing out on the strength that comes from connecting with others, working together.
I see what you mean. There's strength in numbers, but they're all alone.
Right. And what's really interesting is that their initial hesitation, that first choice to stay put, it basically sets off this downward spiral.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. They start doubting themselves, everything seems scarier than it actually is, and they basically let the island take control.
Instead of them taking control of the island.
Exactly. Yeah. It's backwards.
So the inaction is feeding this sense of helplessness almost.
Yeah, like they're digging themselves deeper into a hole. And get this, the game actually shows this happening, visually.
Ow.
Well, Emily and Sara R are still doing nothing, right?
Right. Stubbornly staying put.
And then out of nowhere, this shadowy figure starts appearing offshore.
Like in the water.
Yeah.
Creepy. What is it?
Well, no one knows for sure, but it's clearly a bad omen. It represents, like, their growing fear and guilt. It's like the island itself is reacting to their passivity.
And not in a good way.
Not at all.
Okay, so they've got this creepy shadow figure lurking around. Does it ever go away?
Nope. It keeps coming back, and each time it gets worse. The sense of dread, the danger, it all intensifies. It's like the game is showing them, right there on the screen, what their inaction is creating.
It's literally coming back to haunt them.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that they're not just watching this all happen. They're part of it. Their choices, or lack of choices, are shaping everything.
That's a powerful message. Like, we're not just along for the ride in life, we're active participants.
Exactly, whether we realize it or not.
So Emily and Sarah are still frozen within action. The island is responding negatively to their choices, and they've got this shadowy figure looming over them.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, things go from bad to worse. The whole island starts to fall apart. The weather turns nasty, and this huge storm rolls in.
A literal storm.
Yeah, a huge one. But it's more than just bad weather.
What do you mean?
It's symbolic. The storm, it represents all the chaos and turmoil that Emily and Sara R have basically created by doing nothing.
So they're reaping what they've sown, in a way.
Exactly. And they're totally unprepared for it, physically and mentally.
What about the shadowy figure?
Oh, it's still there. Bigger than ever now, almost real, like you could reach out and touch it. And when that storm hits, it comes right out of the heart of it, just emerges. And it's not just looming anymore.
Oh.
This is it for them. The shadowy figure, it becomes their downfall, the direct consequence of all that inaction.
Wow. That's, heavy.
It is. Emily and Sara R, they get consumed by it. Just gone.
So the game ends for them.
Yeah. Their stories, they don't end with, like, a bang.
Right. Not some big showdown.
It's more of a whimper. Like they just surrendered to the fear that had them stuck from the very beginning.
That's a powerful image.
It really is. It's not just, like, physical death.
Deeper than that.
Yeah. It's like their potential, it's erased. They never even got the chance to see what they could have done on that island.
Because they were too afraid to act.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if they'd made a different choice right at the start? What if, instead of freezing up, they'd explored the jungle or that shipwreck?
It's interesting, though. Their initial choice to stay put, it wasn't necessarily wrong in itself.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's the fact that they kept doing nothing. That's what really did them in. They clung to that beach, that little bit of perceived safety, but the world around them, it kept moving. The game kept changing.
Like they were trying to step in the same river twice.
Exactly. They were trying to hold on to this static moment of safety, but that's not how survival works. Everything changes, the island, the circumstances, everything.
So we can learn something from this, even if we're not playing Survive the Island.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all been there,
Yeah.
right?
Hesitated to make a decision.
Yeah. Let fear or uncertainty hold us back.
Oh, yeah, big time. Whether it's like a career thing or a relationship, even just trying something new, we all feel that paralysis sometimes, like Emily and Sarah are on that beach.
And their story, it shows us something important. Doing nothing might feel safe at the time, but it can actually take you further away from what you really want.
It's like a trap.
Yeah, like a comfort zone that's actually holding you back.
Okay, so that's pretty insightful. But how do we actually break free from that, especially when fear is so powerful?
Well, for me, it starts with realizing that doing nothing is a choice.
Right, we talked about that.
It's not passive. It's something you decide to do, just like any other choice.
Yeah.
And once you see that, you can start to figure out why you're hesitating.
So it's like asking yourself, what's really driving this?
Yeah. Is it fear of messing up? Fear of the unknown? Maybe you're scared of what other people will think.
Ooh, yeah, that one gets me sometimes.
Right. But once you figure out what's at the root of that inaction, you can start to challenge it.
Like fight back against the fear.
Yeah. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And a lot of times when you really look at it, that worst case scenario isn't as bad as you thought.
That's true. We tend to overthink things.
We do. And here's the other thing. Ask yourself, what's the best that could happen if I actually do something?
Like flip the script.
Totally. What opportunities might open up? What awesome stuff could you achieve? It's about changing your perspective.
Instead of focusing on fear, you focus on the possibilities.
That's it. And remember those cries for help, the ones Emily and Sara R ignored.
Yeah, from the ocean.
That was a chance for them to connect with someone, maybe even form an alliance. They could have changed the whole game.
And they missed it because they chose to do nothing.
Right. And those chances, they come up in our lives all the time. It might be speaking up at work, reaching out to someone you admire, taking a risk on a project.
But we hesitate.
Because we're so busy thinking about what could go wrong, we forget about what could go right.
Man, that's so true.
And that's the real tragedy of Emily and Sara R's story. They let fear rob them, not just of survival, but of the chance to see how strong they were.
Every player wakes up on this deserted island
Right.
with zero memory of how they got there.
Oh, wow.
So you're immediately dealing with isolation,
Yeah.
amnesia, this looming sense of danger. Talk about starting the year off with a bang, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
So that's where we first meet Kate, chapter 1.
Okay.
She wakes up on the beach. Classic amnesia scenario, right? Disoriented, head pounding, no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
The only clue she has are some footprints in the sand.
Oh, interesting.
What would you do in that situation?
I mean, that's the ultimate fork in the road, isn't it?
Right.
Do you follow the unknown or do you just strike out on your own?
Yeah.
So what does Kate do?
She chooses to follow the footprints into the jungle.
Brave.
Now, we can't know her exact reasoning,
Right.
but we can infer a certain curiosity.
Yeah.
Perhaps a sense of trust that somebody else is out there and might know more than she does.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Mm.
If you're following the footprints, you're looking for connection, you're looking for answers.
Exactly.
And, given the circumstances, that's totally understandable.
Absolutely.
But what she finds deep in that jungle is even more intriguing.
She stumbles upon a clearing
Okay.
where 8 other players are gathered.
Wow.
All strangers, all equally confused and scared.
Okay, so the isolation is broken,
Right?
but now there's a new dynamic.
Exactly.
The whole group of people trying to figure out how to survive together.
Can you imagine the tension in that moment?
Oh my gosh.
You're relieved to not be alone, but everybody's just as clueless as you are, and they all have different ideas about what to do next.
Right. So what happens? What's the next step for the group?
Well, this is where the game gets really interesting.
Okay.
The group has to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Do they stay put and build a shelter?
Do
Do they explore further or maybe even split up and go it alone? It's like a microcosm of any crisis.
Yeah.
Do you prioritize immediate safety or seek information
Right.
or just give in to the chaos?
So what does Kate do?
She chooses safety,
Okay.
along with a few others.
Mm-hmm.
They decide to focus on building a shelter.
Seems like a logical choice.
It's pretty practical, right?
Yeah.
I think it tells us that Kate might be cautious, someone who values security and order, especially in a situation as unpredictable as this.
Right, when you're stripped of your memories and thrown on a mysterious island.
Totally.
I mean, a little bit of stability can be comforting,
For sure.
but we know survive the island is not about letting you get comfortable.
Oh, absolutely not.
So what happens?
That's where chapter 3 takes a really dark turn.
Oh, no.
So the group is building their shelter when they uncover this huge stone slab carved with skulls.
Oh, that's creepy.
Not exactly a good omen, right?
No.
And as if that wasn't enough,
Oh.
a violent storm rolls in.
Wow, so the island is definitely sending a message.
You are not in control here
Right.
at all.
I mean, can you imagine that
Yeah.
you're already dealing with amnesia?
Right.
Now this ominous warning in a raging storm.
It's terrifying.
So how does Kate react?
This is where we see a real shift in her behavior.
Okay.
Faced with the storm, the skulls, the mounting sense of dread,
Mm-hmm.
she chooses to stand exposed to the elements.
Oh, wow.
She doesn't run, she doesn't seek shelter, she just stands there,
Really?
seemingly accepting whatever fate awaits her.
That's a strange choice.
It is. It's a real departure from her earlier decisions.
Yeah, she goes from careful and pragmatic to almost resigned.
Exactly, and it raises a lot of questions.
Like what?
Is she giving up?
Yeah.
Or is it something deeper?
Right.
Is it a subconscious cry for help? Or a way of trying to assert control in the only way she feels she can?
It's almost like she's saying, I can't fight this, so just do what you will.
Right.
But the island and the game have other plans for Kate.
Like-
This is leading into chapter 4, and this is where things get really unsettling.
The storm is raging, and in the midst of all this chaos,
Yeah.
Kate sees a phantom face from her past.
Like a memory.
A fragmented memory she can't quite grasp.
Wow.
And this image absolutely terrifies her.
Okay.
It breaks whatever trance she was in, and she ends up fleeing blindly into the jungle.
So the island is now messing with her on like a really personal level,
Right.
using her own forgotten past against her.
Exactly.
This is where the psychology of the game really takes hold.
It shows just how vulnerable the players are.
Mhm.
They're stripped of their identities, their memories, and then the island starts to use those missing pieces to manipulate them.
To break them down.
Yeah.
So where does she end up?
Back on the beach.
Okay. Yeah.
Completely exhausted, both physically and emotionally.
It's like all the fight has gone out of her.
And sadly, this is where we say goodbye to Kate in the game.
Oh, no.
She witnesses another player, Andrea, being consumed by this shadowy figure.
Oh, my.
And then the same entity turns on her.
Game over.
Game over.
Wow. That is a chilling ending.
It is.
Kate's story was so short, but so intense.
Yeah.
What can we learn from her decisions?
A what?
Why do you think her game ended there in Chapter 4?
Well, one thing that really strikes me about Kate is how her early choices show like a need for order and control. You
Yeah.
know, following the footprints, seeking shelter with the group. I mean, those are pretty rational responses to a chaotic situation, right?
She wants to make sense of things.
Right.
Find some normalcy in this crazy environment.
Exactly. But then you've got the skull-carved slab.
Yeah.
The storm hits.
Right.
It's like the game is saying, nope, no guarantees here.
And that's when we see the shift in her
Right.
standing in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost an act of defiance,
Yeah,
but also surrender.
it is.
Like she's saying, I can't control this, so just do your worst.
It's fascinating how such a passive action can actually be interpreted as like a rebellion,
Yeah.
a rejection of the game's rules.
It speaks to the psychological pressure of this game.
Absolutely.
You're constantly being tested,
Right.
forced to make decisions with like no information.
You have no idea what's coming next.
And sometimes the only way to cope is to try and break free,
Yeah.
even if it means self-sabotage.
Exactly.
So could that be why she didn't survive?
It's possible.
Was it her internal struggle more than like a failure to play the game?
I mean, think about the moment she sees that phantom face from her past.
Right.
It triggers like a primal fear in her.
Yeah.
A panic that overrides any logic.
And that panic sends her running into the jungle,
Right.
which ultimately leads to her demise.
It's like the island used her own memories,
Yeah.
her vulnerabilities to break her,
That's what makes Survive the Island so compelling.
and disturbing.
Right.
It taps into our deepest fears,
Our traumas.
makes us confront them in ways that we might not be ready for.
It's more than just a survival game.
So much more.
It's like a psychological experiment.
Yeah.
The stakes are not just about staying alive on the island,
Right.
but about staying true to yourself
To your own inner compass.
in the face of all that fear and manipulation.
And Kate's story, while tragic,
Yeah.
offers a powerful lesson for the remaining players.
Like what?
And for all of us, really. I mean, when we're stripped of our comforts, our sense of self,
Yeah.
how do we respond?
Do we cling to logic and control,
Right.
or do we give in to fear and despair? So let's go all the way back to Chapter 1.
Okay.
Sara wakes up on a beach. Classic amnesia trope.
Yeah.
And she has to choose between going into the jungle or heading towards a shipwreck.
Right. And she picks the shipwreck.
She does, driven by fear of the unknown, hoping to find other survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Like right away, we see that consciousness that really ends up defining her whole gameplay.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because that choice, it really tells us a lot about her priorities. She's not someone who takes a lot of risks. She would rather be safe and have company than go explore and potentially find rewards.
Okay, so let's jump ahead to Chapter 2. Sara makes it to the shipwreck, and she finds a group of other survivors. They're trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
Should they climb the mast,
Mm-hmm.
explore the inside of the ship, or
Yeah.
head back into that jungle?
Right.
And of course,
Yeah.
that cautiousness kicks in again.
Yeah, she decides to stay inside the ship
She does.
because she's worried that the mast is going to collapse.
Right, so she's hyper-focused on that one very specific danger, but maybe overlooking other risks that could be lurking inside the ship.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's trading one fear for another
Yeah.
without really thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly. Like she's trying to control her environment by picking the option that seems the least threatening right now, but she could be missing out on something important.
Right.
Or failing to see a hidden danger.
Totally. And then things take a really creepy turn in Chapter 3. Inside the ship, they find this bone dust mural. And while Sarah's checking it out, this supernatural storm erupts. Yeah, then she gets marked by this shadowy figure. It's a big turning point because it shows how her cautious approach, which she's been using to try and survive, actually makes her vulnerable.
Right.
She just freezes up, totally overwhelmed by fear, and she passes out. It's almost like her fear is attracting the island's dark forces.
Interesting.
And all the other players are trying to escape the storm.
Right.
Okay, so then in Chapter 4, her situation gets even worse. She's on the sinking ship.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's trapped in this weird state, like between consciousness and oblivion.
Okay.
And the other players who are with her, Cowan, Jordana, and Lauren, they're trying to wake her up,
Hmm.
but she has to make a choice. Does she fight to wake up or give in to sleep? And she chooses sleep. She thinks she needs to rest,
Ah,
but it turns out to be a fatal mistake.
wow.
It's really sad because you can see how the island, or whatever force is at work here,
Hmm.
is preying on her exhaustion
Hmm.
and her desire for safety.
Makes sense.
So then we get to chapter 5. And she's completely lost in this nightmarish void,
Yeah.
having these terrifying visions. And Cowan, Jordana, and Lauren, they have to abandon her on the sinking ship if they want to survive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because she chose to sleep. They're put in danger. It's like watching her fall deeper and deeper into this paralysis, that passivity which she thought would protect her. It actually becomes her undoing.
Right.
And then, tragically, in chapter 6, the ship goes down, taking Sarah with it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she's consumed by the void. Her memories are all distorted, and she basically stops existing. She becomes just another fragment of the island.
That's so sad.
It's a pretty chilling ending, and a stark reminder of how high the stakes are in this game. So what does it all mean? We've seen Sarah's choices, her consciousness, her fear. How does all of that connect to her fate?
Well, I think it shows how important balance is. Survival isn't just about avoiding risks. It's also about knowing when you need to take action,
Yeah.
even if it's risky.
So she needed to balance her cautious instincts
Hmm.
with a willingness to push herself outside of her comfort zone, to take risks when she had to.
Exactly.
And maybe that's the first big theme that comes out of Sara M's story.
Right.
Like in chapter 2, when she chooses to stay inside the ship instead of climbing the mast, she says, "I'm afraid the mast will collapse."
Right.
Again, it's that focus on a very specific danger.
Yeah, like she's trying to create some order in this really chaotic and unpredictable environment.
But don't we all do that to some extent? We create routines, we stick to what's familiar, all to try and manage our anxiety
Ah, that's a good point.
and to feel like we have some control.
And survive the island. It forces the players to face those anxieties head on. There's no escaping the unknown in this game.
And speaking of the unknown, let's talk about all that supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
The bone dust mural, the storm, the shadowy figure marking Sarah. It adds this whole layer of mystery and dread to the game.
And I think it has a very specific purpose. It introduces this idea that the island itself is a force, maybe even a malevolent one.
Right?
It's toying with the players
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately shaping their destinies.
So it's not just about surviving the elements
Hmm.
or the other players. It's about dealing with this unseen power that seems to be controlling everything.
Exactly.
And in Sarah's case,
Yeah.
her fear and her passivity, they seem to make her even more susceptible to the island's influence.
Uh-huh.
It's like she's surrendering to it,
Yeah.
letting it consume her, first psychologically,
Mm-hmm.
and then physically when she becomes a lost fragment.
It's a scary thought, but it makes you think about free will
Right.
and agency.
Are we really in control of our own destinies?
Or are we just pawns in some bigger game?
I mean, philosophers have been debating that for centuries.
Yes.
And Survive the Island takes that debate and
Mhm.
puts it into this really visceral, interactive space.
Right.
It makes you question the nature of choice itself. Are our choices really our own? Or are they influenced by things we're not even aware of? And how much control do we really have over the consequences of our choices? Like, look at what happened to Sarah, her decision to sleep. It ultimately led to her death, but it also put her friends in danger.
Yeah, and that highlights another important theme, the interconnectedness of our choices in Survive the Island. Your decisions don't just affect you, they have a ripple effect on other players,
Yeah.
sometimes with unintended consequences.
It's like a reminder that we're all connected,
Yeah,
and our actions, no matter how small, can have a big impact on those around us.
yeah. What does Sara M's story tell us about ourselves, about the nature of fear, and the choices we make when we're faced with the unknown?
You know, it's amazing how Sarah's story in Survive the Island, it's like a reflection of our own lives in so many ways. We're always facing choices and potential threats, some real, some imagined. It can be really overwhelming, like
Oh.
we're all on our own islands of uncertainty.
It's like the game is showing us our own anxieties. That feeling of being lost, not knowing what to do, it really connects with the struggles of modern life.
Totally. And I think Sarah represents that part of us.
Yeah.
That just wants to hide,
Yeah.
to find comfort and safety in a world that feels so chaotic and unpredictable. But her story also shows us that while that's understandable,
Yeah.
it can actually be really dangerous in the long run.
Yeah. To really survive, whether it's on a deserted island Or just in life, you need courage, you need to be able to adapt, and you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Sarah always chose what felt safest at the time. But that often stopped her from seeing the bigger picture, and that ultimately led to her downfall.
We're going to be focusing on Lauren, whose story tragically ended in chapter 8.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, survive the island,
All right.
throws all these crazy life or death decisions at you every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to look at how one person navigated that,
Yeah, yeah.
what her choices tell us about her as a person.
I like that.
So to start off with,
Okay.
her very first decision, way back in chapter 1,
Yeah.
she goes straight to the shipwreck,
Oh, interesting.
which, seems pretty practical.
Yeah, for
They
survival.
got to find supplies if you're going to last on a deserted island. But then in chapter 2, things get a little more interesting.
Ooh.
She decides to go inside the shipwreck,
Huh.
which is described as, full of bones and just giving this feeling of dread.
A little creepy.
So maybe it's not just about practicality.
Right.
Her reasoning in the log is that she wanted to find anything salvageable.
Salvageable.
I feel like there's something more to that.
Yeah, like she's thinking beyond just herself at that point.
Maybe.
Seems like there's a hint of wanting to help others,
Yeah, maybe.
like an early sign of altruism.
Okay, so then we get to chapter 3. Things start to get really intense.
Oh.
There's this huge storm. The ship is actually sinking.
Oh, wow.
People are panicking. It's total chaos.
Sounds stressful.
And in the middle of all that, Lauren decides to stay behind
What?
to try and revive another player,
Really?
Sara M, who's passed out.
So she's putting herself at risk to help someone else.
It's a huge contrast to what a lot of the other players are doing.
Right. Everyone else is just trying to save themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's her reasoning for staying with Sara M?
Let me check the logs.
Okay.
Okay, so she says, I guess I'm a sucker for doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing.
It almost feels like that's where things start to shift.
It's like her compassion is outweighing her instinct for self-preservation.
Exactly.
Really interesting.
And the game really pushes you to be this ruthless individual.
Oh, yeah.
It literally tells you to consume other players to survive.
Oh, wow.
But Lauren just completely resists that.
Fascinating.
And it's not just that she helps Sara.
Right.
In chapter 5, she actually calls running away cowardly,
Whoa.
which is a huge statement.
Yeah, especially in a game where survival is everything.
Like she's saying that real courage isn't just about staying alive.
No.
It's about sticking to your morals, even when it's hard.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, and that really comes through in chapters 5 and 6.
Oh.
The ship is literally sinking around them.
Yeah.
Other players are telling her to save herself,
Hmm.
but she refuses to leave Sara.
That's dedication.
But then in chapter 6,
Yeah.
the ship goes down,
Oh, no.
taking both of them with it.
Oh, wow.
And it's even more heartbreaking because Sarah's still unconscious.
So her sacrifice was for nothing.
In a way.
Imagine.
It makes you wonder
Yeah.
if the island,
Mm.
or whatever force is controlling it,
Right. Right.
is deliberately exploiting Lauren's compassion.
Like setting her up to fail.
It's chilling when you think about
It's
it.
for sure.
Like the island's not just a setting.
Right.
It's an active participant in this whole moral drama.
It's testing the players.
And maybe even manipulating them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Which brings us to chapter 7, what I think is the most pivotal moment in Lauren's journey.
Okay. What happens?
She finds herself in this strange underwater space.
Underwater.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And she's given a choice.
Okay.
She can consume another player, Jordana,
Okay.
and survive.
Mm-hmm.
Or she can let go
Ganta.
and face potential oblivion.
Wow.
And remember, in Survive the Island, being consumed means being completely erased from the game.
Right, becoming the hollow.
Exactly. It's like a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Because you lose your identity completely.
That's heavy.
So the stakes are unbelievably high for Lauren.
Right, both physically and existentially.
And she chooses to let go.
Wow.
Her reasoning is in the game log.
Okay.
I can't destroy another human voluntarily, she writes. There's hope I need to push through.
She'd rather face oblivion than betray her values.
Even facing erasure, she refuses to compromise.
That's
And
incredible.
that's where her compassion becomes truly radical.
How
It's
so?
not just about helping others, it's about refusing to play by the rules of a system that demands you dehumanize others to survive.
She's actively rebelling against the game itself.
And tragically, that's what seals her fate.
Oh, no.
In Chapter 8, she becomes the Hollow.
So her act of defiance, her unwavering commitment to her values, leads to her erasure.
It's a devastating outcome.
Yeah.
But it also reveals so much about her character.
Absolutely.
It's like the island punishes her for her compassion.
It's almost like a Greek tragedy,
Right.
where the hero's greatest strength is also their fatal flaw.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if there's any way to win this game without sacrificing your humanity.
It's a question that's going to stay with me for a while, I think.
Me too.
I'm really curious to see what happens to the other players.
Me too, me too.
And if anyone else will make a similar stand.
All right, well, let's take a quick break and we'll be back to discuss this more in a bit.
Sounds good.
It's like the island itself is testing her like it's a character in the game.
Right.
And becoming the Hollow isn't just game over.
Yeah.
It's like a warning, you know?
Totally. Like, this is what happens if you don't play by our rules.
Exactly.
It really makes you think, is her compassion a strength or a weakness in this crazy environment?
Yeah, good point.
I mean, the game seems to reward ruthlessness.
Totally.
But Lauren chose a different path.
And it cost her.
It did.
It's almost like she's trying to prove there's a different way to survive.
Interesting.
One that doesn't involve giving up your humanity.
But the island doesn't seem to care about that.
Nope.
Her story really highlights that tension between individual morality and the game's logic.
Right.
It's almost like the developers are making us confront our own values.
Yeah.
Like, would you be willing to do what it takes to win?
Even if it means compromising your morals.
Exactly.
Makes you think.
It does.
And it's not just the big choices, like
Right.
whether or not to consume another player.
Mm-hmm.
Even her smaller decisions show that compassion.
Oh, like what?
Well, like in Chapter 4, when she decides to stay with Sara M during the
Mhm.
storm,
Yeah.
she says maybe she knows or saw something in her dreams.
Huh. Interesting.
It's like she's grasping at straws trying to find a reason to help.
Maybe she's just desperate,
Yeah, could be.
trying to make sense of a chaotic situation.
Right.
It's hard to tell if it's pure compassion or just fear.
Or maybe a bit of both.
Probably, which makes her character even more interesting.
Yeah, there's so much depth to her.
And don't forget about her using the word cowardly
Oh, yeah, right.
for running away.
Heavy stuff.
It is, especially in a game where self-preservation is key.
Totally. It suggests she sees courage as more than just physical bravery,
Yeah, it's about standing up for what you believe in.
even when everyone else is telling you to do the opposite.
It's like she's actively rebelling against the game's principles.
Right?
And it becomes this commentary on survival itself.
Yeah.
Like, is it really just about staying alive?
Or is there something more to it?
Exactly. Is there a moral dimension we can't ignore?
Which brings us back to her final decision in Chapter 7.
Oh, yeah.
Consume or be consumed.
And she chooses neither?
Nope, she chooses to let go.
Wow.
It just goes against everything the game is telling you to do.
Right.
And it speaks volumes about who she is as a person.
For sure.
She'd rather be erased than become what the island wants her to be.
It's powerful stuff. It is.
It really highlights the strength of her compassion,
Yeah.
even in the face of, annihilation.
Yeah.
It makes us ask ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
what are we willing to sacrifice to survive?
There's something about Paul's story that just, well, it gets under your skin.
Totally. It kind of feels like a Greek tragedy almost. You see this guy trying to do the right thing, make the smart move, but it all just goes so wrong.
And a lot of the early analysis centered on Paul's cautious nature. He was a thinker, not a risk taker. In Chapter 1, remember that choice, beach or shipwreck?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He goes for the shipwreck. Safer, he says. Easier. Seemed like a solid move at the time, given the whole, waking up on a mysterious island with no memory thing.
Oh, totally. You're disoriented, vulnerable. Information is key, right?
Yeah.
But knowing what we know now, that caution, well, it hits different. Makes you wonder if it was, I don't know, maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's the big question, isn't it? Was his cautiousness his undoing, or was he, doomed from the start?
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. I mean, at face value, his decision to go to that shipwreck, it makes sense.
It does, yeah. But here's the thing, right? The island, it starts to work its magic almost immediately. subtle at first, you barely notice it. Like, remember in chapter 3, the bone dust circle?
Yeah.
He gets marked by that shadowy figure. At the time, it just seems like a visual thing, right? Atmosphere. But looking back, it's like the first crack in his composure, like a seed of doubt has been planted.
That's what makes Survive the Island so unnerving, right? It
Oh,
doesn't
right.
force you to do anything. It's this like insidious whisper in your ear,
Mhm.
guiding you towards, well, who knows what.
Exactly. It's manipulation disguised as choice. And it leads us to, well, I think the turning point in Paul's story, chapter 4. He's tormented by those whispers, urging him back to the shipwreck, the logical move. Head for the beach, get away. But he doesn't. He obeys. And he even says, and I'm quoting here directly from the game, like, in Survivor, they sign up to play, so let's play. It's it's chilling.
It's like he's surrendered to the game's logic, even though it makes no sense.
Yeah. He's accepting the frame, even if it's, well, a death trap. And from this point on, you see this shift. He's not the Paul from chapter 1 anymore. He's reactive, almost passive, like he's just waiting for the island to tell him what to do.
And that passivity, it just gets amplified in chapter 5, right? Those whispers are getting louder, driving him crazy. But instead of fighting back or coming up with his own escape plan, he does what? He turns to another player, Graham.
It tells you everything you need to know about his state of mind at this point. The game, the whole point is player agency, right?
Right.
It says so right in the briefing document. But here he is, giving up that power. He needs someone else to tell him what's real, to validate his experience. It's the opposite of the self-reliant Paul we saw at the start.
It's like he walked straight into a trap he built himself. He wanted safety, control. But it led him to a place where he feels totally helpless, dependent.
Ah,
And the island. It's feeding off that.
oh, absolutely. It's masterful psychological manipulation. It gives you the illusion of safety, then punishes you for trying to break free. It's what makes Paul's story so gripping. It's not just survival. It's about the slow death of your own willpower.
It's like giving up a part of yourself, piece by piece.
Exactly. And as we head into chapter 6 and 7, things get even more, well, tragic. The island tells Paul to bring Graham to the lighthouse, but instead of, taking charge, she tries to reason with him. Graham ends up escaping.
And Paul's left holding the bag, so to speak. Again, he chooses inaction, avoids conflict. It's a pattern now. But is it really a choice at this point? I mean, can he actually defy the island?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's what makes Paul's story so relevant to all of us. Where's the line between free will and, well, coercion? Paul's attempt to escape, it triggers the most terrifying display of the island's power yet.
Chapter 8. Reality itself bends to stop him from leaving, and he's erased by that shadowy figure. It's brutal, and it leaves you with this feeling of, like, inevitability, like it was always going to end this way.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it also shows you the truth about this game. The island rewards those who adapt, who play by its rules no matter how messed up they are. Paul, with all his caution, his morals, it cost him everything.
It's like his strength was also his fatal flaw. He wanted to play it safe so badly, he missed the bigger picture. The island wasn't just a physical challenge, it was psychological warfare.
And Paul lost that war. His story is a warning, a warning about what happens when you cling to old strategies in a world that's constantly changing. The island wants you to adapt, to embrace the unknown, even if it means doing things you wouldn't normally do.
It makes you think about, like, learned helplessness. Every time Paul tries to take control, he fails. And it chips away at his agency until, by the end, he's almost given up.
That's a great point. And it makes you wonder, right? How do we navigate a world where the rules are always changing? How do we hold on to our sense of self when everything feels out of control?
These are questions Paul's story forces us to ask. It's a reminder that sometimes survival isn't about playing it safe. It's about embracing the chaos, adapting to the unpredictable, and making those tough choices, even when every instinct is screaming at you to run the other way.
It's those choices, those moments where we go against our own nature that determine if we survive or if we get, well, swallowed whole. And that whole idea of choice versus coercion, it comes to a head in chapter 7. The shadowy figure shows up, right? Demands a sacrifice. 3 options, just brutal. Sacrifice yourself, sacrifice Typhona, or run.
Oh, man. Talk about a no-win situation. How do you even begin to, I don't know, wrap your head around that?
That's the brilliance and the cruelty of Survive the Island, right? It forces you to look at your values in the most extreme way possible. And what does Paul do? He runs.
Again, choosing inaction, avoiding the hard call. But is it really a choice at this point? I mean, can he actually defy the island?
It's the question that hangs over Paul's entire story, and it's a
And
question we all have to ask ourselves, right? Where does choice end, and well, where does something else take over? Because when Paul tries to escape, it triggers the most terrifying display of the island's power yet.
Chapter 8. The island. It literally warps reality to stop him. And he's erased, gone.
Yeah.
It's rough. And you're left with this feeling like there was no other way, like it was always going to end this way.
Yeah, it's a gut punch, for sure. But it also reveals something essential about the game. Survive the island, it rewards those who adapt,
Yeah.
who play by its rules no matter how twisted they get. Paul, he held on to his caution, his morals, and it destroyed him.
It's almost like the things that made him strong, they became his weaknesses.
Yeah.
He was so obsessed with minimizing risk, he missed the point entirely. This wasn't just about physical survival, it was a mind game.
And Paul got played. His story, it's a warning. It shows what happens when you cling to old ways of thinking in a world that demands something completely different. The island, it doesn't want you to just survive. It wants you to change, to become something, well, something else entirely.
It's like those whispers, they weren't just sounds. They were like rewriting his code,
Yeah.
changing who he was at his core.
And maybe that's the most terrifying part of it all.
Yeah. You know, thinking about the game's objective, the whole escape the island thing, the briefing document, it never actually says what escape means, does it?
It's vague, right? Intentionally so, I think. It reflects the ambiguity of the island itself. You're thrown in there blind, making choices with, well, potentially life-altering consequences.
And it brings us right back to Paul's ending. He tries to escape, literally. But it doesn't work. He never understood the real challenge, the psychological game being played.
His story, it shows how important it is to understand the rules. But in Survive the Island, the rules, they're not always clear. They're hidden in the environment, in the AI's responses. It's like a pressure cooker, constantly testing you.
He was trying to solve a puzzle, but he was using the wrong tools, like trying to force a door open when there's a hidden key somewhere.
And the tragedy is, Paul wasn't a bad player. He was smart, cautious, had a strong moral compass. But he couldn't adapt. He couldn't let go of his old ways of thinking, even when the world around him was demanding something new.
It's a reminder that sometimes, holding onto your beliefs too tightly, it can be just as dangerous as being reckless.
Absolutely. Paul's journey, it's like a metaphor, you know, for the challenges we all face. We're constantly getting new information, making decisions without all the facts. The world feels chaotic, and it's tempting to retreat into what feels safe, to try and control things. But, as Paul's story shows, that can be just as deadly as running headfirst into danger.
So what's the takeaway? What can we learn from Paul's, well, his downfall?
I think the biggest lesson is adaptability. Being able to see when your old ways aren't working anymore, to adjust, to learn from your mistakes, to accept that change, well, it's just a part of life.
It's about more than just surviving, right? It's about understanding that to truly succeed, you have to evolve, to learn, to grow, to embrace the uncertainty.
Exactly. And on that note, I think we should leave our listeners with one final thought. Could Paul have survived? Was there a moment, a choice that could have changed everything? And if so, what does that tell us about our own ability to change, to break free from the things that hold us back?
It's a question worth thinking about. As we continue to explore this game and all the, well, the messed up, beautiful things it throws at us, until next time, keep questioning, keep analyzing, and keep exploring the crazy world of Survive the Island.